17 seconds. That's all it took for the ocean to swallow USS F-1 and 24 men whole. For 107 years, they remained in total darkness, 1,300 feet beneath the California coast. Last May, light finally touched them again. What the cameras revealed wasn't just a submarine, it was a tomb. In late February 2025, a deep-sea expedition led by Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution captured the first high-resolution images of USS F-1, a submarine lost in 1917 during a training accident off San Diego. The wreck rests upright at 1,300 feet, remarkably intact. The hull shows clear impact damage. Riveted steel plating, a periscope still mounted, deck features frozen exactly as they were the morning it went down. The discovery wasn't accidental. Naval historians and ocean engineers had been searching for the site for years, using advanced sonar mapping and the human-occupied vehicle Alvin, a manned deep-sea submersible capable of withstanding crushing deep-sea pressure. When Alvin descended through the murk and the floodlights illuminated the hull, the crew went silent. Woods Hole released 3D photogrammetric models, constructed from thousands of high-resolution stills, in May 2025. The imaging shows structural details down to individual rivets, technology that didn't exist even a decade ago. The submarine measures 142 feet long, small by modern standards, tiny even. Built in 1911 by Union Iron Works in San Francisco, F-1 was part of the Navy's F-class, early diesel-electric boats designed for coastal defense and harbor patrol. These weren't deep ocean hunters. They were training platforms, learning tools for a Navy still figuring out how submarines actually work. The wreck site was located approximately off the San Diego coast in U.S. territorial waters. Exact coordinates remain classified to protect the site from looters and unauthorized divers. At 1,300 feet, recreational access is impossible anyway, but the Navy isn't taking chances. This isn't just salvage, it's forensic archaeology. The submarine is a national war grave, protected under the Sunken Military Craft Act. No artifacts have been removed. Everything documented has been done through careful observation, with precision instruments that can see what human eyes struggle to perceive at that depth. The wreck tells a story, but only if you know how to read it. The imaging shows the submarine resting on a flat, silty seabed, no sign of dragging or tumbling. It fell straight down and stayed there. The bow points northwest. The stern is slightly elevated, suggesting the weight distribution shifted as it sank. But overall, the vessel is astonishingly complete. Marine growth covers much of the exterior, barnacles, sponges, corals that have claimed the steel as their own. But beneath that biological layer, the structure holds. The conning tower stands proud. The deck hatches are visible, and along the starboard side, just aft of midships, the collision damage is unmistakable. Dents, punctures, torn plating where another submarine struck with enough force to breach the pressure hull in seconds. The imaging technology used by Woods Hole is the same system that mapped the Titanic, the Bismarck, and dozens of other deep-sea wrecks. It works by taking overlapping high-resolution photographs from multiple angles, then stitching them together into a three-dimensional model, accurate to within millimeters. The result is a digital twin of the wreck, a model you can rotate, zoom into, measure. You can count the rivets. You can see the rust patterns. You can trace the seams where different hull plates meet, but you can't see inside. Not yet. The hatches are closed, portholes are dark, and whatever lies within those compartments has been sealed away for a century. The Woods Hole team worked in collaboration with the U.S. Navy's Naval History and Heritage Command, the National Science Foundation, and interdisciplinary specialists in marine engineering and historical preservation. The mission was funded specifically to document early 20th century naval technology and honor the memory of lost sailors. But there was another objective, rarely spoken aloud in official press releases: to see if opening the submarine would even be possible, to assess whether the interior could be explored without desecrating what has become, by necessity and time, a sacred space. The answer based on the 2025 imaging is yes, technically. But whether it should be done is another question entirely. But the vessel itself is only the beginning of the mystery. On December 17, 1917, USS F-1 was conducting a routine training dive in broad daylight. Its sister submarine, USS F-3, was operating in the same waters. At approximately 10:15 a.m., the two vessels collided. The impact was catastrophic. F-1's hull breached. Seawater poured into the compartments faster than the hatches could be sealed. The submarine went down in 10 seconds. 24 men were inside. 5 made it out, scrambling through flooding chambers and swimming for the surface in a desperate fight against pressure, cold, and time. 19 drowned in the interior compartments, unable to escape the rising water. Naval accident reports from 1917 described the collision as a navigation error compounded by limited communication technology. Early submarines had no sonar, no radar, only periscopes and visual coordination. The F-class boats were small, diesel-electric coastal vessels designed for harbor defense, not open ocean maneuvers. The official inquiry concluded that both submarines were conducting submerged maneuvers in close proximity. F-3 surfaced unexpectedly, poured directly in F-1's path. The collision was unavoidable by the time either crew realized what was happening. Witnesses aboard surface vessels described seeing F-1 go under and not come back up. Within minutes, an oil slick appeared, then debris, then silence. Rescue efforts were immediate but futile. The water was too deep for divers of that era. The technology to reach 1,300 feet simply didn't exist. The Navy marked the approximate location and declared the submarine lost with all hands. Except it wasn't all hands. 5 men survived. They had been in the conning tower or near open hatches when the collision occurred. They felt the impact, heard the screaming rush of water, and made split-second decisions that saved their lives. They swam hard, fighting through the shock of cold water, the disorientation of sudden submersion, the terror of knowing their shipmates were dying just feet away. They surfaced, gasping, choking, alive. 19 men weren't so lucky. Historical weather records show calm seas that day, clear skies, mild winds. This wasn't a storm. It wasn't enemy fire. It was human miscalculation in an unforgiving environment. The wreck now lies exactly where it sank. No debris field, no scattered wreckage. The submarine dropped like a stone, bow first, and settled intact on the ocean floor. The collision damage is still visible, dense, punctured, torn plating on the starboard side, where F-3 struck. Inside those compartments, sealed for over a century, the conditions remain almost unchanged. Cold, dark, anaerobic, the kind of environment that preserves organic material, clothing, leather, flesh. At 1,300 feet, the water temperature hovers just above freezing. Oxygen levels are minimal. Bacterial activity is slow. Decomposition, while inevitable, happens at a glacial pace compared to shallow wrecks or surface conditions. This means that whatever was inside F-1 when it sank, whatever the crew had with them, whatever positions they were in when the water claimed them, may still be there, recognizable, intact. The 1917 accident was the U.S. Navy's first submarine loss during World War I, though the war itself had nothing to do with it. America had entered the conflict earlier that year, and the Navy was ramping up submarine training to prepare for potential Atlantic operation. The F-class boats were workhorses, not glamorous, not cutting edge, but functional platforms for teaching young sailors how to handle submerged vessels. F-1 had been in service for 5 years at the time of the sinking. It had completed hundreds of dives. The crew knew the boat. They trusted it, but trust doesn't stop physics. And when 2 steel hulls meet underwater at speed, the outcome is never in doubt. The official death toll was 19. Navy archives confirmed 24 total crew, 5 survivors, 19 fatalities. Their names are recorded in naval documentation, though many have been lost to time and incomplete records. The families of these men received telegrams they never wanted to read. The bodies were never recovered. There was no funeral, no burial, just a location marked on a chart and a wreck too deep to reach. Until now. Yet, what they found in the imaging was even more unexpected. The external surveys reveal no scattered personal effects, no visible artifacts floating in the surrounding water. Everything is inside. The hatches are closed. The periscope housing is intact. The control surfaces, rudder, dive planes are locked in position, exactly as they were when the crew made their final, frantic adjustments. The submarine didn't break apart. It sank whole, according to Woods Hole's analysis. The hull integrity suggests minimal post-sinking degradation. Marine growth, encrusting organisms, sediment covers the exterior, but the structure beneath remains solid. The 3D models show no breach large enough to allow full interior flooding in the bow or stern compartments after the initial impact. That means the interior spaces are likely still sealed, airtight, or rather, watertight, holding whatever was trapped inside on that December morning in 1917. The collision breach is concentrated on the starboard side, roughly amidships. That's where F-3 struck. The impact would have flooded the engine room and adjacent compartments immediately, but the forward and aft sections may have remained intact long enough for watertight doors to be sealed, either by crew members trying to save the boat or automatically as the pressure differential forced them closed. If that's the case, then those compartments became sealed chambers, tombs within the tomb. Historians know some of the names of the men who died, young men, mostly in their 20s. Their service records list their hometown, their families, their service dates, but they have no graves on land, no markers. There's no final resting place anyone can visit. The submarine is their grave, and inside those compartments, in the cold, lightless silence, their remains may still be present, along with everything they carry: uniform, tools, letters, photographs, the ordinary personal effects of men who never expected to die that day. No one has looked inside, not yet. The imaging technology used so far can only document the exterior, but the evidence suggests what might be there. Early 20th century sailors carried personal items in small sea bags or foot lockers, photographs of sweethearts, letters from home, pocket watches, religious medals, small tokens of lives lived on land, carried into the unforgiving deep. These objects, if they survived, would tell stories the official records never could. What a sailor chose to bring aboard tells you what he valued, what he feared losing, what he needed to feel human in a steel tube beneath the waves. The uniforms themselves are artifacts: Navy issue wool, leather boots, canvas work clothes. In the cold, anaerobic environment of a sealed submarine compartment, these materials can last for decades, even centuries. Wrecks from the 18th century have yielded intact clothing. There's no reason F-1 would be different. And then there are the bodies. This is the part no one wants to discuss, but it's unavoidable. 19 men died inside that submarine. Their remains went down with the wreck, and unless scavengers found a way in, unlikely at that depth, with hatches sealed, those remains are still there. Cold water and low oxygen slow decomposition dramatically. Soft tissue may be gone, but bones, teeth, and hair can persist for centuries. Some deep-sea wrecks have yielded nearly complete skeletons, still clothed, still in the positions they held when death came. The thought is horrifying, but it's also profoundly human. These men didn't disappear. They didn't vanish into myth. They're still there, waiting in the dark, exactly where they fell. The 3D models show the conning tower hatch in the closed position, the forward torpedo room hatch, also closed, the aft engine room access, sealed. Whether these were shut by the crew in a desperate attempt to contain the flooding, or whether they slammed shut from the pressure of rushing water, the result is the same. The interior is a time capsule, frozen at 10:15 a.m., December 17, 1917. Woods Hole researchers have noted that the wreck's position, upright, stable, undisturbed, makes it an ideal candidate for future internal documentation. But they're also acutely aware of what that means. Opening those compartments, even with the capabilities of submersibles like Alvin, means confronting the human cost of this disaster in the most direct way possible. It means seeing what the ocean has held for 107 years. And now these silent witnesses are starting to speak. Opening those compartments, even with advanced technology, presents an extraordinary challenge. The wreck sits at 1,300 feet, far beyond recreational diving limits. The pressure at that depth is nearly 600 pounds per square inch. The interior is pitch black, and disturbing a protected military grave requires not just technical capability, but legal and ethical justification. The U.S. Navy and Naval History and Heritage Command manage the site under sovereign immunity. The Sunken Military Craft Act of 2004 explicitly prohibits unauthorized disturbance of U.S. military wrecks, especially those containing human remains. Any future exploration would require Navy approval, extensive planning, and specialized equipment capable of precision work in confined, fragile spaces. Woods Hole's current imaging used non-invasive photogrammetry, mapping the wreck with light and cameras, without physical contact. To go further would mean navigating into sealed hatches, documenting flooded compartments, and recording human remains in situ. It's technically feasible. Alvin and other manned submersibles have manipulator arms and micro cameras. But it's not a decision made lightly. The submersibles currently used for deep-sea archaeology are marvels of engineering. Alvin, for instance, can carry 3 people to depths of nearly 21,000 feet. It's equipped with high-definition cameras, sonar arrays, manipulator arms with haptic feedback, and suites of sensors that measure everything from water chemistry to structural stress. But maneuvering inside a century-old submarine without damaging fragile structures or disturbing human remains requires extreme precision. One wrong move could collapse a corroded bulkhead, crush preserved artifacts, or desecrate remains that should be treated with dignity. The wreck is deteriorating, slowly but inevitably. Saltwater corrosion, bacterial degradation, and physical stresses from ocean currents are eroding the hull. Marine archaeologists estimate that without intervention, wrecks at this depth can remain stable for centuries. But once structural failure begins, collapse can happen rapidly. The question isn't if the submarine will eventually be lost to the sea, it's when, and whether we document what's inside before that happens. Steel doesn't last forever underwater. Even at depth, even in cold conditions, oxidation continues. Iron-eating bacteria consume the hull at a microscopic level, converting metal into rust that flakes away into the current. Every year, F-1 loses a little more of itself. The 3D models provide a baseline, a record of what the wreck looks like now. Future surveys can compare new images to the 2025 data and measure exactly how much deterioration has occurred. That information will help archaeologists predict how much time they have, whether it's decades or centuries, before critical structures fail. But time isn't the only enemy. The wreck sits in an active shipping lane. Anchors, fishing gear, and subsea cables pose risks. A single dragged anchor could rip through the hull and destroy compartments that have survived for over a century. There's also the human element. Descendants of the crew have expressed mixed feelings. Some want the site left undisturbed, a sacred grave that should remain sealed. Others argue that documenting the interior honors their ancestors by preserving their stories, ensuring they aren't forgotten. The Navy has conducted consultations with known descendants, though tracking down families after 100 years is challenging. Some lineages have died out. Others have scattered across the country. A few have come forward, sharing old photographs, letters, and service records passed down through generations. One descendant, the great-grandson of a sailor who died aboard F-1, was interviewed after the discovery was announced in May 2025. He said he'd always known his ancestor was down there, somewhere off San Diego. But seeing the 3D images made it real in a way family stories never could. He also said he didn't know if he wanted them to go inside. Part of him wanted to know everything. What his great-grandfather's last moments were like, what he was carrying, where he died. But part of him felt it was wrong to disturb the grave, to shine lights into spaces that have been dark for so long. It's a tension that runs through all maritime archaeology. The desire to know versus the imperative to respect. The value of historical knowledge versus the sanctity of the dead. The Navy has not announced any plans for internal exploration. The 2025 mission was explicitly non-invasive, but the technology exists, the questions are mounting, and the clock is ticking. If the decision is made to go further, the process would likely involve manned submersibles like Alvin or specialized remotely operated vehicles, platforms small enough to navigate through existing openings or carefully created access points. These vehicles can carry cameras and lights into flooded compartments, documenting everything without removing anything. The footage would be reviewed by archaeologists, historians, and Navy officials before any public release. Human remains would be documented but not shown. Your personal effects would be cataloged. Structural details would be analyzed. And then the question becomes, what do you do with that information? Do you leave the wreck as it is? Now that you know what's inside, do you attempt conservation? Do you recover artifacts and place them in museums? Or do you seal it back up and let the ocean keep its dead? Because what we do next will decide if this history survives another century. USS F-1 was the U.S. Navy's first submarine loss during World War I, though it never saw combat. It went down in American waters during peacetime training because two vessels misjudged their positions by a matter of feet. The site raises questions that still have no answers. Why exactly did the collision happen? Were there design flaws in the F-class submarines that made navigation errors more likely? Did the survivors carry trauma that went unrecorded in official reports? And most hauntingly, what remains inside those sealed compartments? Naval experts have noted that early submarine safety protocols were minimal. No black boxes, no voice recorders, just witness testimony from the 5 survivors and physical evidence from the wreck itself. The 3D models show details that weren't visible in earlier sonar surveys, but they can't see through steel. The interior is still a mystery. Archaeologists have proposed future missions that could use penetrating imaging technology or micro cameras inserted through existing openings, but no dates or approvals have been announced. The 1917 inquiry interviewed the survivors extensively. Their accounts described chaos, the sudden jolt of impact, the immediate flooding, the frantic scramble for hatchet. But memory under trauma is unreliable. Details conflict, timelines don't quite line up. One survivor reported hearing watertight doors slamming shut as he climbed through the conning tower. Another said he saw men trapped behind a sealed bulkhead, pounding on the steel. A third claimed the lights went out instantly, plunging the interior into total darkness. These accounts are all we have, but they're fragmentary, incomplete, and they only tell the story of the men who lived. The 19 who died left no testimony. Their final moments are known only to the ocean. The wreck is a time capsule. It holds not just the physical remains of the crew, but the material culture of 1917 naval life, the tools, the uniforms, the mundane objects that rarely survive in museum collection. It's a snapshot of a moment when submarine warfare was still experimental, dangerous, and deeply misunderstood. But it's also a reminder. The ocean doesn't distinguish between wartime heroism and peacetime error. It claims lives with indifference, and it holds them in darkness. For as long as the steel can bear the weight of the deep, the F-class submarines were transitional vessels. Built in an era when submarine doctrine was still being written, they represented the Navy's best guess at what an effective underwater warship should look like. They were small, cramped, prone to mechanical failure, and yet they worked well enough to train a generation of submariners who would go on to serve in World War II. F-1's loss led to changes in training protocols. Our submarines were no longer allowed to conduct close proximity maneuvers without surface coordination. Communication procedures were tightened. Safety drills were expanded. But those changes came too late for the 19 men aboard F-1. As of January 2026, the wreck remains untouched, monitored, protected, waiting. Woods Hole has indicated that the 3D models and high-resolution images will be made available to researchers and the public through online archives and potential museum exhibitions. The U.S. Navy Museum and the San Diego Maritime Museum have expressed interest, though no specific display dates have been confirmed. There's talk of a memorial, a plaque perhaps, at a San Diego waterfront location, listing the names of the lost crew, something tangible for descendants and history enthusiasts to visit, and since the wreck itself will always be out of reach. But memorials are for the living. The dead are still down there, in the cold and the dark, surrounded by the remnants of the lives they once lived. 19 men went down with USS F-1 on a clear December morning in 1917. Some of their names are known, their families mourned, but their final moments, and what lies with them in the deep, remain beyond our reach. For now, the technology to look inside exists. The historical justification is sound. The legal framework is in place, but the decision to open those compartments hasn't been made. And maybe it never will be. Maybe some doors are meant to stay closed. Maybe the ocean, for all its indifference, is a more fitting guardian of these men than any museum could ever be. Or maybe we owe it to them to bear witness, to document, to remember, to ensure that their sacrifice, however accidental, however forgotten, is never erased by time. The wreck of USS F-1 lies 1,300 feet beneath the Pacific, silent and still. The cameras have captured its exterior. The models have preserved its shape. But the truth of what happened inside, the human reality of those final seconds, remains locked away. And the ocean holds the only key. Respect the deep, honor the lost, and never forget the weight of the sea.